The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. 12 species sat in their floating seats, arranged in a perfect circle around the central platform. Holographic displays showed burning worlds, cities turned to ash, fleets reduced to floating metal. The Vorn Dominion had come, and nothing could stop them. High Counselor Varys stood at the center, his tall gray body trembling with barely controlled fear. His species, the Talon, had ruled this council for 300 years. They were proud. They were ancient. And now, they were terrified. 3 homeworlds in 7 days, Varys said, his voice echoing through the chamber. The Neth colonies are gone. The Priam fleet is destroyed. The Vorn do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They conquer and they enslave. The representatives whispered among themselves. Some wept, and others sat in shocked silence. From the smallest seat in the chamber, a human woman raised her hand. Ambassador Corrin had served as Earth's voice on the council for 15 years. She was patient. She was diplomatic. But today she was tired of being ignored. High Counselor, she said, Earth offers its full military support. We can... Laughter cut her off. It came from the Talon delegation, and soon others joined. Varys raised a hand to silence them, but his smile remained. Ambassador, we appreciate the gesture, he said. But our records show that humanity possesses exactly 12 combat vessels. Old designs, weak shields, limited weapons. He tilted his head in mock sympathy. Perhaps your species should focus on protecting your own colonies. Leave the real fighting to those who are capable. Corrin's face remained calm, but her hands tightened beneath the table. She had heard these words many times. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage. They had joined the Council only 40 years ago. In that time, they had been given the worst territories, the fewest trade rights, and the least respect. Of course, High Counselor, she said quietly. I understand. The meeting continued, but Corrin stopped listening. She thought about her home. She thought about her people. And she thought about the message she had received that morning, encrypted with codes that officially did not exist. The message had been simple. Tell them nothing. The ghosts will handle this. She did not know who the ghosts were, but she trusted the sender. Far across the galaxy, on a colony world called New Busan, a young engineer named Minji was running through crowded streets. Sirens wailed from every building. Giant screens showed the approaching enemy fleet. Hundreds of Vorn warships, their hulls covered in the trophies of conquered worlds. Everyone to the shelters! Soldiers shouted. Move! Move! Minji pushed through the crowd, searching for her younger brother. She found him near the central plaza, staring up at the sky with wide eyes. He was only 14, too young to understand what was coming. Jinho! She grabbed his arm. We need to go. Now. But the ships, he whispered. There are so many of them. Minji looked up. The Vorn fleet filled the horizon like a swarm of insects. Their weapons were already glowing, preparing to fire. She had studied their tactics. First, they would destroy the cities. Then, they would land troops to collect survivors. Those survivors would become slaves. I worked to death in Vorn factories. She pulled her brother toward the nearest shelter. But before they reached it, her communicator buzzed. She glanced at the screen and froze. The message was from an unknown sender. It contained only 2 lines. Evacuation unnecessary. Stay indoors. The ghosts are coming. What is it? Jinho asked. Minji shook her head slowly. I don't know. Above the planet, the Vorn commander watched his fleet take position. Warlord Dreth was a massive creature, standing nearly 3 meters tall. His body was covered in armored scales, and his eyes burned with cruel intelligence. He had conquered 17 worlds. New Busan would be his 18th. Status report, he growled. All weapons charged, Warlord, his officer replied. Human defense forces are minimal. 2 patrol ships, one orbital station. They are attempting to evacuate civilians, but they will not succeed in time. Dreth smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Humans. Such fragile creatures. The Council was wise to give them so little. They are barely worth the effort to conquer. He turned to the main view screen, which showed the blue and green world below. Cities sparkled like jewels on its surface. Soon they would burn. "Begin the bombardment," Dreth ordered. "Leave nothing standing." His officers moved to obey. Weapons locked onto targets, energy built in the massive cannons mounted on every ship. And then something strange happened. Alarms screamed across the Vorn fleet. Officers shouted in confusion. Dreth spun toward his tactical display and saw something impossible. Space was tearing open, not in one place, in dozens of places. The massive rifts appeared throughout the system, glowing with strange energy. And from those rifts, ships began to emerge. Human ships. But these were not the weak vessels the Council had recorded. These ships were enormous. Their hulls were black as night, covered in weapons that the Vorn had never seen before. They moved with perfect coordination, spreading into attack formation with terrifying speed. "What is this?" Dreth demanded. "Where did they come from? How many are there?" His officer's voice shook as he answered. "Over 200 vessels, Warlord. They have no transponders, no registration codes. They do not exist in any database." The main screen flickered. A human face appeared, an older man with gray hair and calm eyes. He wore a military uniform that bore no insignia that the Vorn recognized. "This is Admiral Tae Hyun of the Human Defense Fleet," the man said. His voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. "You have entered human territory. You have threatened human lives. You now have 60 seconds to withdraw your forces." Dreth stared at the screen in disbelief. Then he began to laugh. 60 seconds? You dare threaten me?" He leaned toward the camera. "I am Warlord Dreth. I have burned worlds. I have crushed empires. Your little fleet means nothing to— 50 seconds, Tae-hyun said. Dreth's laughter died. Something in the human's eyes made him uneasy. But he was a Vorn. He did not retreat. "All ships," he commanded. "Destroy them." The Vorn fleet opened fire, and the ghosts answered. The first Vorn volley lit up the void like a burning star. Thousands of plasma bolts and missiles raced toward the human fleet. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The Vorn had used this tactic countless times before. No enemy had ever survived it. The human ships did not move. Admiral Tae-hyun stood on the bridge of the flagship Hyundai, watching the incoming fire on his tactical display. Around him, his crew worked in perfect silence. No one panicked. No one even raised their voice. "Shields holding at full power, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Do-yun from the tactical station. He was young, barely 25, but his eyes were sharp and his hands were steady. "Enemy missiles will reach us in 4 seconds, added Captain Yuna from her position at his side. She was a tall woman with short black hair and a scar running down her left cheek. She had earned that scar fighting pirates in the outer territories 10 years ago. She had earned her rank through blood and fire. Tae-hyun nodded slowly. "Activate point defense. All ships." Across the human fleet, weapons came alive, but these were not the clumsy cannons that the Council had seen on human patrol ships. These were precision instruments, designed in secret laboratories and tested in hidden training grounds. Blue beams of light shot from every human vessel. They moved faster than the eye could follow, cutting through the darkness with surgical accuracy. Each beam found its target. Each target disappeared. In less than 2 seconds, the entire Vorn volley was gone. Missiles detonated harmlessly in the void. Plasma bolts scattered into nothing. Not a single shot reached the human shields. On the Vorn command ship, Warlord Dreth stared at his display in shock. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "That's impossible," his officer whispered. "No point defense system is that accurate. No species has that technology." Dreth found his voice. "Fire again! All weapons! Everything we have!" The Vorn fleet unleashed its full fury. Wave after wave of destruction poured toward the human ships, and wave after wave was erased from existence before it could reach its target. Admiral Tae-hyun watched the display calmly. Then he turned to Do-hyun. "Lieutenant, how many enemy vessels are currently in optimal firing position?" Do-hyun's fingers danced across his console. 43 cruisers in the forward formation, Admiral. They are bunched together for maximum firepower." "A mistake," Tae-hyun said. "Target them. Fire main batteries." The Hyundai shuddered as its primary weapons activated. Along its hull, massive railguns hummed with power. They were not plasma weapons or energy beams. They were solid projectiles, accelerated to a fraction of light speed by magnetic fields. When they fired, they did not glow or flash. They simply moved, so fast that they were invisible to the naked eye. The 43 Vorn cruisers did not have time to react. One moment they existed. The next moment, they were clouds of expanding metal and fire. The projectiles tore through their shields like paper. They ripped through their armor like cloth. They did not stop until there was nothing left to destroy. 43 targets eliminated, Do-hyun reported. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking slightly. He had trained for this moment his entire life. But training was different from reality. Captain Yuna put a hand on his shoulder. "Breathe, Lieutenant. We're just getting started." Across the fleet, other human ships were achieving similar results. They moved together like a single organism, each vessel covering the others, each weapon finding its target with perfect precision. The Vorn fleet, so confident moments before, was being torn apart. On New Busan, Minji and her brother watched from a window. The sky above them was filled with light, explosions, weapons fire, burning ships. But the human vessels moved through the chaos untouched, their black hulls reflecting the flames of their enemies. "Who are they?" Jinho whispered. "I thought we only had 12 ships." Minji shook her head slowly. "So did everyone else." Back in the battle, Warlord Dreth was losing control. His fleet had lost over 80 ships in less than 5 minutes. His officers were screaming reports that made no sense. Human weapons that could not exist, human shields that could not be broken, human tactics that predicted every Vorn movement before it happened. "Fall back!" Dreth finally roared. "All ships, fall back to the rally point!" It was the first time in his career that he had ordered a retreat. The shame burned in his chest like fire, but he was not a fool. He could see the numbers. If he stayed, he would lose everything. The Vorn fleet turned and ran. Admiral Tae-hyun watched them go. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply nodded once, then turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to the colony," he said. A moment later, his face appeared on every screen on New Busan, and millions of people stopped and stared, their fear slowly turning to wonder. "Citizens of New Busan," Tae-hyun said, "the enemy has been driven back. Your homes are safe. Your families are safe." He paused, his old eyes softening slightly. "You are not alone. You were never alone." The channel closed. Across the planet, people began to cheer. They did not understand what had happened. They did not know where this fleet had come from. But they knew one thing: they were alive. On the bridge of the Hyundai, Captain Yuna moved to stand beside her admiral. "The Council will have detected this battle," she said quietly. "They will have questions." Tae-hyun nodded. "I know. They will be afraid of us now." "Good," Tae-hyun said. "Fear is the first step toward respect." Far away, in the great hall of the Galactic Council, alarms were ringing. Sensors had detected the battle. They had recorded the weapons fire. They had counted the ships. High Counselor Varys stood frozen. staring at the data on his screen. 200 human warships. Technology that surpassed anything in Council records. A fleet that officially did not exist. How? He whispered. How is this possible? Ambassador Corrin sat in her small seat, her face carefully neutral, but inside she was smiling. The ghosts had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The Galactic Council chamber had become a place of shouting and chaos. Representatives from 12 species screamed at each other, at their aides, at anyone who would listen. Fear filled the air like poison gas. High Counselor Varys slammed his hand against his podium, demanding silence. It took several minutes before the noise died down. "We have all seen the recordings," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "The human fleet, their weapons, their technology." He turned his cold eyes toward Ambassador Corrin. "Ambassador, you will explain this. Now." Corrin stood slowly, every eye in the chamber fixed upon her. She could feel their fear. She could feel their anger. But she also felt something else, their respect. For the first time in 40 years, the Council was truly looking at humanity. "What would you like me to explain, High Counselor?" she asked calmly. "Everything!" Varys shouted. "Where did those ships come from? How long have you been building them? Why did you lie to us?" Corrin took a deep breath. "We did not lie to you. You asked us how many ships were in our registered defense fleet, and we told you 12. That was true. Then what are those 200 warships?" "Those are not part of our registered fleet," Corrin said simply. The chamber erupted again. Varys's face turned dark with fury. "You hid a military force from the Council. This is a violation of every treaty we have signed." Corrin's eyes hardened. "With respect, High Counselor, humanity signed those treaties under pressure. We were given no choice. We were told to accept limited territory, limited ships, limited rights, or we would receive nothing at all." She stepped forward, her voice rising. "You treated us like children. You laughed at our requests for aid. You gave us the scraps from your table and expected us to be grateful." Silence fell over the chamber. No one had ever spoken to the High Counselor this way. "So yes," Corrin continued. "Oh, we built ships in secret. We developed weapons in secret. We trained soldiers in secret, because we knew that when danger came, we could only rely on ourselves." Far from the Council chambers, Admiral Tae-hyun walked through the corridors of the Hyundai. The ship was massive, nearly 2 kilometers long, and it hummed with quiet power. He passed crews working at their stations, engineers maintaining systems, soldiers preparing equipment. Captain Yuna fell into step beside him. "The junior officers are asking questions," she said. "They want to know if we'll be punished for revealing ourselves." Tae-hyun shook his head. "We did what was necessary. The Council can complain, but they cannot undo what we have done." They entered a briefing room where Lieutenant Do-hyun and Engineer Minji were waiting. Now, Minji had been brought aboard from New Busan. Her skills were too valuable to leave on a colony world. She still looked shocked by everything she had seen. "Admiral," she said nervously, "I still don't understand. How did we build all of this without anyone knowing?" Tae-hyun sat down with a tired sigh. He was 63 years old, and he had been keeping this secret for most of his life. "It started 40 years ago," he said, "when humanity first made contact with the Council. Our leaders were hopeful. They thought we would be welcomed as equals." He shook his head slowly. They were wrong. The Council had looked at humanity and seen nothing impressive. Humans were physically weak. Their technology was primitive. Their territory was small. And they were placed at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy and told to be satisfied with their position. "But some of us saw the truth," Tae-hyun continued. "We saw how the Council treated newcomers. We saw how they ignored calls for help from smaller species. We knew that if we ever faced a real threat, the Council would abandon us without a second thought. So they had begun to prepare. First came the hidden shipyards, built inside asteroid fields where no one would look. Then came the research stations, buried deep in toxic nebulae that other species avoided. Training facilities were established on rogue planets, frozen worlds drifting between stars, invisible to Council sensors. Everything was done in secret. Everything was funded through hidden channels. Generations of humans worked their entire lives on projects they could never speak about. "We called ourselves the Ghost Program," Tae-hyun said, "because to the rest of the galaxy we did not exist." Lieutenant Do-hyun leaned forward. "How many people knew?" "At first only a few hundred. Over time the number grew, but everyone understood the rules. Total secrecy. No exceptions." Tae-hyun's eyes grew distant. "I joined when I was 18. I have given 50 years of my life to this fleet. I have missed birthdays, weddings, funerals. I have watched friends grow old while I stayed on ships that officially did not exist." Minji felt tears forming in her eyes. "Why? Why sacrifice so much?" Tae-hyun looked at her directly. "Because I have a daughter and a grandson, and I wanted them to live in a galaxy where humanity is respected, where no one can threaten our worlds and laugh while they do it." He paused. "Today, we took the first step toward that future." Back in the council chamber, Ambassador Corrin was finishing her speech. "You ask why we hid our strength," she said. "I ask you, what would you have done if you knew? Would you have welcomed us as partners? Or would you have seen us as threats and tried to destroy us before we could grow?" No one answered. They all knew the truth. "Humanity does not want war with the Council," Corrin continued. "We want peace. We want cooperation. But we will not achieve that by being weak. We will achieve that by being strong enough that you must take us seriously." High Counselor Varys stared at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was cold. "This matter is not finished, Ambassador. There will be consequences." Corrin nodded. "I expect there will be, but first we have a more urgent problem." She pointed to the main display where sensor data was updating in real time. "The Vorn fleet that attacked New Busan was only a small force. Our intelligence indicates that their main armada is gathering. Over 2,000 warships. They are coming to finish what they started." The chamber fell silent again. 2,000 ships. Even with humanity's secret fleet, those numbers were terrifying. "You can punish us later," Corrin said. "But right now, we need to work together, or we will all die separately." Varys looked around the chamber. He saw the fear in every face. He saw the burning worlds on the display, and for the first time in 300 years, he swallowed his pride. "What do you propose?" he asked quietly. Corrin allowed herself a small smile. "An alliance, equal partners, fighting side by side." The war for survival was about to begin. The Chorus Rift stretched across space like a wound in the stars. It was a narrow passage between two massive nebulae, and it was the only path the Vorn Armada could take to reach Council space. If the Allied fleet could hold this position, they could stop the invasion. If they failed, billions would die. Admiral Tae-hyun stood on the bridge of the Hyundai, studying the tactical display. The Allied fleet had gathered over the past week, 800 Council vessels of various sizes and designs, plus his own 200 human warships. 1,000 ships total, facing an enemy force twice their size. "The Vorn will arrive in 15 minutes, Lieutenant Do-hyun reported. "Their formation is standard assault pattern. Heavy ships in front, carriers in the middle, command vessels at the rear." Captain Yuna shook her head. "They're not even trying to be clever. They think they can crush us with pure numbers." "Perhaps they can," Tae-hyun said quietly. "We cannot afford to be overconfident. Today will be difficult." On another part of the ship, Commander Hyunwoo was preparing his soldiers. He was a large man with thick arms and a shaved head, and he had led ground forces for 20 years. His troops called him the Bear because of his strength and his protective nature. "Listen carefully," he told his assembled teams. "Our job today is to board enemy command ships and disable them from the inside. We will face heavy resistance. Some of us will not come back." He looked at each face in turn. "See, but every ship we disable is thousands of enemy guns that cannot fire at our fleet. Every minute we buy is a minute our people stay alive. Understood?" "Yes, Commander!" the soldiers shouted. In the engineering bay, Minji was running final checks on the ship's systems. She had been officially assigned to the Hyundai only days ago, but she had already impressed everyone with her skill. The chief engineer had died in a training accident months before, and the position had remained empty. Now, by necessity, it was hers. "Power systems stable," she muttered to herself. "Shield generators at full capacity, weapons charged." She took a deep breath. "We're as ready as we'll ever be." The Vorn arrived exactly on schedule. 2,000 warships emerged from fold space in a wall of metal and fire. They were ugly vessels, covered in spikes and weapons and the bones of conquered enemies. At their center flew the massive command ship of Warlord Dreth, rebuilt and reinforced after his defeat at New Busan. Dreth had not forgotten his humiliation. He had thought of nothing else for days. Today, he would have his revenge. "All ships," Taehyun said calmly, "engage." The battle began with a roar of weapons fire that lit up the entire rift. Plasma bolts and missiles and railgun rounds filled the space between the fleets. Ships exploded on both sides. Fighters swarmed like angry insects. The Council ships fought bravely, but their technology was inferior to both the humans and the Vorn. They took heavy losses in the first minutes, their shields failing under concentrated fire. Taehyun watched the casualty reports with a heavy heart. All human vessels moved to support the Talon formation. They're being overrun. The Hyundai surged forward, its weapons blazing. Behind it, the rest of the human fleet followed in perfect formation. They cut into the Vorn assault like a knife, destroying dozens of enemy ships and giving the Talon time to regroup. But the Vorn kept coming. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. The Allied line began to bend. Captain Yuna coordinated the fighter squadrons from her station. When the leader of the 3rd Wing was killed, she made a quick decision. "Admiral, I'm taking direct command of the fighters. We need someone with experience out there." Taehyun nodded. "Go, and come back alive." Yuna ran to the hangar bay and climbed into a waiting fighter. Seconds later, she launched into the chaos, her voice cutting through the radio chatter. "All fighters, form on me. We're going to punch through to their carriers." She led 50 fighters in a desperate charge through enemy lines. Vorn interceptors swarmed around them. Yuna twisted and dodged, her hands moving faster than thought. She shot down enemy after enemy, her fighter dancing through explosions and debris. They reached the carriers. Yuna's squadron unleashed their missiles, and 3 massive enemy vessels went up in flames. But the cost was high. Only 20 fighters made it back. On the Hyundai, the situation was growing desperate. A Vorn battleship had broken through the line and was targeting the flagship directly. "Shields at 40%, Minji shouted from engineering. "We can't take many more hits like that." Taehyun's face remained calm. "Lieutenant Do-Yun, can you hit their reactor core?" Do-Yun studied his display. The enemy ship was partially hidden behind a cloud of debris from destroyed vessels. The shot would have to curve around multiple obstacles and strike a target less than 10 meters wide. "It's nearly impossible, Admiral." "Nearly is not completely. Take the shot." Do-Yun closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered his training. He remembered every simulation, every exercise, every lesson. Then he opened his eyes and fired. The railgun round left the Hyundai at incredible speed. It curved past a chunk of destroyed hull. It threaded through a gap in the debris field. It slipped past the enemy's defensive fire by centimeters. And it hit the reactor core dead center. The Vorn battleship exploded in a ball of white fire. The blast cleared space around the Hyundai, just giving them room to breathe. "Target destroyed," Do-hyun whispered. He was shaking. Tae-hyun put a hand on his shoulder. "Well done, Lieutenant. That shot will be remembered." But the battle was far from over. Commander Hyun-woo and his boarding teams had launched toward enemy command ships, their small transports dodging through the crossfire. They landed on 3 different vessels and began fighting their way through corridors filled with Vorn soldiers. Hyun-woo led his team personally. He carried a heavy rifle in his hands and grenades on his belt. Vorn warriors were larger than humans, stronger than humans. But Hyun-woo did not care. "Push forward!" he roared, cutting down enemies with precise bursts of fire. "Take the bridge!" They fought for every meter. They lost soldiers with every room, but they kept moving, kept fighting. They kept dying so that others could live. Finally, Hyun-woo reached the bridge of the enemy vessel. He killed the captain himself, then planted explosives on the main controls. "All teams report," he said into his radio. 2 of the 3 boarding missions had succeeded. The 3rd team had been killed to the last soldier. Hyun-woo closed his eyes for a moment, honoring their sacrifice. "Detonate all charges," he ordered, "and get us out of here." The explosives went off. 3 Vorn command ships went dark, their crews dead or dying. In the center of the Vorn fleet, Warlord Dreth was screaming with rage. His perfect assault was falling apart. Human ships were everywhere, striking from unexpected angles, hitting targets that should have been safe. "Kill them!" he roared. "Kill them all!" He ordered his command ship to target the Hyundai directly. All weapons, maximum power, he would destroy that ship personally. But Lieutenant Do-hyun saw the attack coming. He calculated angles and trajectories in his head. He saw a possibility. Dangerous, almost suicidal, but possible. "Admiral, I have a shot at the enemy flagship." Tae-hyun looked at the display. Dreth's ship was behind layers of protection. The shot would have to pass through a debris field between 2 Allied vessels and strike the flagship's reactor before their weapons could fire. "Take it," Tae-hyun said. Do-hyun fired. The round traveled for 3 heartbeats. Then Warlord Dreth's flagship exploded. The Vorn Armada froze. Their leader was dead. Their command structure was shattered, and the Allied fleet was still fighting. One by one, Vorn ships began to surrender. Others tried to flee. The Battle of the Rift was over. Admiral Tae-hyun sat down heavily in his chair. Around him, his crew began to cheer. But he felt only exhaustion and sorrow. They had won, but so many had died to make it possible. "Send a message to all ships," he said quietly. "The enemy is defeated. Begin rescue operations for survivors." He paused. "And record the names of everyone we lost. They deserve to be remembered." The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was full for the first time in decades. Representatives from every species in known space had gathered, not just the 12 council members, but dozens of others. Some had traveled for weeks to be here. Some had never been allowed inside these walls before. They had come to witness history. Ambassador Corrin stood at the central platform, wearing the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Beside her stood Admiral Tae-hyun, Captain Yuna, Lieutenant Do-hyun, and Commander Hyun-woo. Behind them, visible through the massive windows, floated the battered hull of the Hyundai, a symbol of the battle that had saved them all. High Counselor Varys rose from his seat. He looked older than he had a month ago. The war had changed him. It had changed everyone. "We are gathered today to discuss the future of the Galactic Council," he said. "But first we must address the past." He turned to face the human delegation. For 40 years, humanity was treated as a lesser species. You were given poor territory. You were denied fair trade. You were mocked when you asked for help. He paused, and for the first time, his voice carried something like shame. This treatment was wrong. It was unjust. And it nearly cost us everything. Whispers filled the chamber. No High Counselor had ever admitted fault so openly. The humans built their fleet in secret because they did not trust us, Varys continued. They were right not to trust us. We gave them no reason to believe we would protect them. We gave them every reason to protect themselves. He turned to address the full assembly. Some of you have suggested that humanity should be punished for hiding their military strength, that their secret fleet violated our treaties. His eyes swept across the chamber. I ask you, would any of us have done differently? If your people faced extinction and no one would help, would you not do everything possible to survive? Silence answered him. I move that all charges against humanity be dismissed, Varys said. And I further move that Earth be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and privileges that status provides. The chamber erupted. Some shouted in anger, others cheered. But slowly, as the noise died down, representatives began to stand. One by one, they rose from their seats. First, the species humanity had saved, then their allies, then even former critics. When the vote was called, it was nearly unanimous. Only 3 species voted against. They were quietly escorted from the chamber. Humanity was finally equal. After the ceremony, celebrations spread across council space. On 100 worlds, humans and aliens drank together, danced together, laughed together. The war had united species that had been divided for centuries, but not everyone celebrated. And Admiral Taehyun stood alone on the observation deck of the Hyundai, looking out at the stars. The ship had been through so much. Scorch marks still covered its hull. Entire sections remained without power. It would take months to fully repair. Captain Yuna found him there, as she always did. The Council has offered you a position, she said. Head of the new Joint Defense Force. They want you to lead all combined military operations. Taehyun nodded slowly. I heard. Will you accept? He was quiet for a long moment. I joined the Ghost program when I was 18 years old. I thought I would spend my entire life in the shadows, building something I would never see completed. He turned to face her. Now everything has changed. Our fleet is public. Our people are recognized. The mission I dedicated my life to is finished. Is that a bad thing? No, Taehyun said. But I don't know what comes next. I've never had to think about next before. Yuna smiled. Maybe that's the point. You gave us a future. Now you get to live in it. On Earth, the celebrations were especially joyful. Minji had returned to her family, bringing her brother Jinho to meet their parents for the first time in months. They sat around a small table in their home, eating food and telling stories. You're a hero now, Jinho said proudly. The youngest chief engineer in fleet history. Minji shook her head. I just did my job. The real heroes are the ones who didn't come back. Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. You're alive. That's enough for us. That's everything. On New Busan, you're the colony world that had nearly been destroyed. Construction crews were already rebuilding. The scars of the Vorn attack would take years to fully heal. But the people worked with hope now, not fear. They had seen what humanity could do when pushed to the limit. They knew they were not alone. Back in council space, a different kind of work was beginning. Species that had been enslaved by the Vorn Dominion were being liberated. Worlds that had been conquered were being freed. Humans led many of these missions, side by side with council forces. Lieutenant Do-hyun commanded one such mission. He had been promoted after the Battle of the Rift, and now led a small flotilla to a distant system where Vorn forces still held thousands of prisoners. The liberation was quick and clean. Do-hyun had learned from the best, and he applied those lessons perfectly. When the prisoners were freed, they looked at their rescuers with wonder. Humans, one of them said. We heard stories. We thought they were lies. Do-hyun smiled gently. They weren't lies. We're here, and you're safe now. Commander Hyunwoo took a different path. He resigned from active duty and began training the next generation of soldiers, not just humans, but all species who wanted to learn. His training facility became famous throughout Council space. Species that had never worked together now trained side by side, learning to trust each other. War is terrible, he told his students, but sometimes it's necessary. And when it comes, you need to be ready. Not just physically, mentally, emotionally. You need to know why you're fighting and what you're protecting. Months passed, and the galaxy slowly settled into a new normal. The Galactic Council met regularly, and humanity's voice was heard equally in every debate. Old prejudices faded, new friendships formed, but some worried about the future. In private conversations, Council members whispered concerns. Humanity had hidden a fleet for 40 years. What else might they be hiding? What would they do with their new power? Ambassador Corrin addressed these fears directly at a council session. "You are right to be cautious," she said. "Power is dangerous. It can corrupt even those with good intentions." She looked around the chamber. "But I will tell you what humanity wants. We want our children to grow up in a galaxy where they are respected, where they have opportunities, where they do not have to build secret armies just to survive." She paused. "We could have used our fleet to conquer. We could have made ourselves rulers of this galaxy. We chose not to. That choice tells you who we are." High Counselor Varys nodded slowly. "Actions speak louder than words. Humanity has proven itself through action." "Then let us move forward together," Corrin said. "Not as rulers and subjects, not as old members and new members, but as equals, partners, friends." The session ended with applause, something that had never happened in Council history. That night, Admiral Tae-hyun made his decision. He accepted the position on the Joint Defense Council. He would help build something new, a united force that would protect all species equally. Captain Yuna stood beside him as he signed the official documents. "You think they'll ever fully trust us?" she asked. Tae-hyun thought about the question. And he thought about 40 years of secrecy. He thought about the prejudice and the mockery and the long road that had brought them here. He thought about the people who had sacrificed everything for a dream they would never see. "No," he said finally. "Maybe not fully, not for a long time." He looked up at her with tired eyes that still held a spark of hope. "But they'll respect us, and from respect, trust can grow." Yuna nodded. "That's a start." Tae-hyun smiled, a rare expression on his weathered face. "That's more than we ever had before, and I think those who came before us would be proud." Outside the window, the stars shone cold and bright. Among them, human ships patrolled beside council vessels. Engineers from a dozen species worked together to rebuild damaged worlds. And children who had grown up fearing aliens now played with friends from other planets. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed it. And whatever came next, they would face it together. Not as ghosts hiding in the shadows, but as equals standing in the light.